Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Giuffre Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the host for the Dean's Chat podcast. My guest today is no stranger to anyone in podiatric medicine over the last 30 years. Dr. Bret Ribotsky, in fact, brought the first podcast to our profession in 2008. It had a 9-year running through 2017, and it was called Meet the Masters. In 2016, Dr. Ribotsky was inducted into the Podiatric Medicine Hall of Fame. He also practiced in Boca Raton from 1995 to 2017. He also had a 2-year stint during that time at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation. Dr. Ribotsky graduated from the Temple University School of Podiatric Medicine when it was the Pennsylvania College. He finished his 3 years of residency training at Doxey Medical Center in Salt Lake City. I am just scratching the surface of what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to Dean's Chat, Dr. Ribotsky.
Jeff, it's an absolute pleasure to watch the meteoric rise of you from dean to dean to dean, and now a social celebrity among our profession. You probably can't go to a restaurant anywhere at a podiatry seminar and not be mauled with people looking for autographs.
We'll run with that, Brett. It's all good. Well, we're low-key, informal on Dean's Chat. We'll just go with Brett and Jeff. Brett, I got to tell you, I've been looking forward to getting you on the show. I saw one of your comments in one of my early episodes saying, hey, this kind of reminds me of Meet the Masters. And I thought we would dive right into that background. You truly were ahead of your time. Podcasting was not mainstream. Tell us about how you even thought about doing it and what the process was 15 years ago.
I have always looked to say, if everybody's running one way, run the other way. I was class president when I was in school. I was president of AgFoam before they changed the name and all these other things. But I've always been a kind of classically different than probably everyone else. I look for what people aren't doing. And we were all going to seminars, and I was doing a lot of lecturings. I probably have given close to 800 seminars. I've been at 800 seminars, both around the globe a couple times in plastic surgery, dermatology, and maybe 650 in podiatry. I love the stage. But why do I love the stage? And it came to me that it wasn't the sleeping on the bench at Cleveland Airport when you got snowed in, and it wasn't missing your flight and running and having somebody spill food on your suit. None of that stuff was the part I liked. It was the couple minutes after you gave the lecture at the end when people came up to you and said, you made a difference. You saw the light go on in somebody's face. And I would love to be an academician, but podiatry doesn't pay enough to be a academician to the level where I thought I could be more contributing. So I was looking for a way to let people come to a seminar to get that experience of the knowledge. I was looking to get that little maybe attaboy thing to build upon. And then together, how do I do this in order to capture the most number of people in a convenient format? And this was a rough time. We got to go back. Cell phones just became prominent. I mean, the iPhone only came out a couple of years before that. The beginning of this stuff where, you actually paid for long distance phone calls. You paid for minutes on your cell phone. So, but the only thing you didn't pay for were these like toll-free numbers or these numbers where you could call in. And I found a company that allowed you to do those sort of things. They would basically, I guess, aggregate your minutes and sell it to somebody else so they could get a better rate on something else. So remember, if you're not paying for it, you're what's being sold for everyone out there,
Absolutely.
And all that stuff. So as you do these things, you're looking for it. So the idea of like a video was my first thing because I am an animatronic in some capacity. I like talking. I like, showing slides. Anyone's been to one of my lectures, the music and everything's in the background. The infotainment was something I coined in probably 25 years ago where, you see a bad foot and George Thorogood, Bad to the Bone is playing in the background on the day he was born, So you can have a lot of fun because I figured out even before that people we pay the most in our society are people who entertain us. Whether it's today, Taylor Swift, nobody makes more than her. Football players who entertain us. We don't pay a lot of money to the neurosurgeon. We don't pay a lot of money. I mean, medicine, podiatry doesn't get a raise. I made more money in my first bunionectomy than my last 5 or 6 bunionectomies 30 years later.
Right. No doubt.
So So I came up with the idea, how do you get this? So we decided to do phone calls. So I, beat the pavement, got a bunch of people I knew, had a reasonably good Rolodex. So I knew that, the first 100 guests I could call on the phone and say, hey, Jeff, I need you. Which weekend's good for you on Tuesday night? So people came on board. When you get to the second 100 and the third 100, and I got into low 400s, now you don't know the people that well. So now you have to have a reasonably good reputation. And, if you took people and you cut the legs out from underneath them on episode 1, nobody's coming on episode 2.
Right.
So you have to build upon it. But yet, at the same point, you want to get that salient information. It's important. What's the secret sauce that makes Mike King? Or what's the secret sauce that makes Bill Scheer him and makes, every leader in our profession stand out just a little bit? Because everyone puts the shoes on the same way. Everybody has the same opportunity, relatively the same education,
right?
So, but everyone did something a little bit different with it. I listened to one yesterday that you just released, and you were talking about, how everybody kind of went through diabetic foot through Texas, and how Larry's program did all this, and how they did all the research, and then Richard Pollack, who became the guru of actually podiatric research. I realized how much money Richard made in the research side. You start seeing what he earned. And if you watch one of the Meet the Masters, we go into that in pretty heavy detail, but a couple $1 million a year, you're like, wait a second, maybe those wounds don't look as awful as I thought they were.
That's funny because Richard and I used to do all the clinical trials together in the early to mid 90s, whether it was dermograph
or
amplograph.
Yeah. I mean, I traveled a bunch. I was on the, what was the magic gel stuff? Regranix. Yep. I kept waiting for them to put that on a Band-Aid. Forever, I've been waiting for them to put that on a Band-Aid.
Well, so let me ask you this, Bret. So I went back to the podcasting app where your podcast was housed, if you will, and you can go through and see all the different guests. And so what percentage of your podcasts were the people in terms of what they were to the profession or what they did outside of the profession versus a discussion with Warren Joseph about different antibiotics that were coming out? You know what I'm saying? Academic versus social.
Well, I would say even Warren Joseph, everybody wanted to know where he got his blue sports coat. I mean, I wanted to go to the Podiatric Smithsonian with how many miles with a little plaque underneath it. But I think there's secret sauce to everything. Why did Warren decide to do something a little different, and how he found out a niche? Right. Now, I was looking for nobody ever did a niche in podiatry on pain management. Right. And, never seen somebody go to that niche. I founded DermFoot, helped create that whole concept of dermatology, because I realized that those are the people who drove the nicest cars. They were the ones who had the biggest summer homes with a dermatologist. And I was blessed that my late wife was one. So I had this unique thing that they would pay her $15,000 to give a lecture for 2 hours, and they would pay me $1,200. I'm like, that's not going to work anymore. So now I knew what the companies are willing to do and what they're willing to spend. So as you went to each individual person, I kind of believe there's a little bit of both in everybody. Now, I did probably have 20 people in the course of the 400, so that's 5%, who were not podiatrists. They were business people. They were Ken Helmler, who will tell you how to set up a charitable trust or something so you don't pay taxes. Remember, you'll keep more money in life if you learn how to defer taxes until well after you're dead than any other time. And I think I'm set up now for the next 360 years. That's the next time taxes in my family lineage will be paid, because it's set up with these kind of longevity trusts, right, that are set up that way. So I think that was a big part. But I believe everybody has a secret sauce. You can go talk. I mean, the guy who used to cut my lawn was one of the happiest human beings I ever met. I always wanted to know what made him so happy. And he got this tremendous zen from accomplishment, right, that when the lawn was done, he looked at it and was like very proud of his work. Right. And I was like, wow, if I could incorporate that into every mycotic nail patient that walked in the door, it'd be exciting. Take the example that, everyone works hard and is tired, at the end of the day. But if it's the day before vacation and you're going away for 2 weeks, you probably work harder than you did the 2 days before that. You got emergencies, everything's coming in, and you're just handling everything. And at the end of the day, you have more energy than when you started the day. What changed? 1 square foot of real estate between your ears. How you think is everything. And how you ask yourself questions is everything. And when people learn the secret to success is really within them. You choose your success. You choose opportunity.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this, because, it's easy for me. I mean, I start a podcast. I can have people load it up. I can have people edit it. I can get it in video. I can get it on radio. I'm, Spotify, etc. So back then, you didn't have that.
No, I did it all.
Right. So the
key was you had to.
Go ahead.
So I start off finding somebody, call them up, get them involved. After a while, you have the same emails. So you just send people the same emails looking forward to having you. I would have text messages I would send them. And I was a real big, if anyone ever heard me talk, or we can talk about, contact management and how to use, email systems that just send people. I did it for patients for many years and for referring doctors. They constantly get emails and I don't even think about them anymore. You just write them. But I would, record the thing, put it in an MP3 player. Then I would scrub it and highlight the clicks, the ums, whatever you can, automatically take out. This is before AI. Now AI does that all by itself these days. So they do it. Then I would upload it to a bulletin board system and allow anyone to listen to it live or download it. And this was the early, iPhones were new. You still had iPods, the little phone. The music wasn't connected to your telephone at that point. I mean, I think, what are we up to 15 now? So we got to go back. Yeah, I think 2007, the iPod came out. So nobody had them until 2008 or 2009. So
the iPhone. Yeah, no, you're right. It's interesting though, because, we were sharing earlier when I was in Miami, you and I did one of your Meet the Masters, and this is something we can discuss a little bit later. But back then, we had more students than we had residency programs. Remember, you and I had a discussion about the balance
quite a bit
and everything.
And we had the balance committee,
absolutely,
or the out of balance committee.
Well, yeah, they did a pretty darn good job for some years. But I'll tell you what, it's the pendulum swung. But let's talk about that in a little bit. But one of the things we did in Miami at Barry University was the PA program got was between $1.5 and $2 million grant to stream and teach a PA program in the Virgin Islands to train up locals in the Virgin Islands to become PAs, to become primary care providers. There is no way. I mean, if we did that today, we just could do it. We wouldn't have to think about it, right? But back then it took streaming.
You still want the $2 million. You still want the $2 million. Yeah, but the condo it's not going to buy you is not as big as the one that would have bought you back then.
Right, but you wouldn't get the money today. So I mean, the technology is completely different. Is my point.
Yeah, I mean, things have become easier. Everybody is a photographer. I mean, everyone walks around with the little, I like to call the rectangle of knowledge.
Absolutely.
You don't need, and I would imagine in education, you don't need to know things. I mean, I know how much molybdenum is in a screw. It's never been something valuable in my life. I've learned calculus. I've never used it to this day. I keep hoping to use calculus before I die on something. But you learn it and you move on with it because you never get that opportunity to do it. Right. So I always worry and wonder what needs to be in the brain and what needs to be what you have access to instantly. And I think as a surgeon, I was shocked how many, before I got hurt, residents I worked with didn't know what was a bipentate muscle or a single muscle or a tripentate muscle. And they didn't know that. And I said, well, when you're looking at it in the second intermetatarsal space, how do you know? Is that, the adductor or something in that direction? Well, and they don't know.
The most important course we teach in the colleges today is lower extremity dissection lab after they've taken anatomy. So they know what everything looks like because they've already taken gross anatomy. Then we give one limb, mid-femur distal, for every 2 students. And that's where they learn their anatomy that they can employ for biomechanics and surgery, et cetera. It's a great foundation.
You need to have a multi-level mind. You need to know what's above, what's below, what's on the side. Yeah. And, I give honor to those who taught me because they didn't make it easy in Philly. No. They went out of their way to be not friendly people. They're not on my Christmas card list, many of them.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Because you know what, Brett, for me, it's the exact opposite. I went to the California school. 4 of the best years of my life. We had so much fun, learned a lot, set ourselves up for residency. So it's funny how people have different takes on that kind of thing.
I wonder what the alumni, adjusted for how many people. give? What percentage of dollars is given to the New York school, Philly? Because you would see who had a better time at school.
Well,
it'd be a very interesting review.
Yeah, but Bret, I have a philosophy on that. People give very generously to their undergraduate experience because they were going to football games, they were going to parties, they had girlfriends, boyfriends, future wives, etc. When you go to one of the colleges of podiatric medicine, you go there to work. It's not quote unquote fun as we define fun. So when they think back, I don't think you see a lot of big donors. And every once in a while, I mean, when I was the dean in Miami, we had a big party at ACFAS in Orlando. One of the graduates walked in and handed me a $25,000 check. I said, "What's this for?" He goes, "Without Barry University, I wouldn't have all these great opportunities I have today." And that's Wonderful. Not the common theme, right?
No, very, very uncommon. But I wonder if it's this, I feel better. I enjoyed the experience. And maybe as you get older, now you start looking at, lifetime charitable trusts.
Right.
Where you got to give away, you avoid paying 30, 40% taxes on your money, but you have to give away 5% a year. And if doctors were educated about that, they'd realize that I could throw 5% to this school to where I went instead of giving it to, save the whatever.
Right.
And the school does better, but at the same token, I save 20% on taxes. So I give away 5%. It's still in that 15% gain. So why not do it?
It makes sense. I mean, I'm the same way. I mean, I've given back to like Barry University. I have an endowed scholarship there. It was a great experience, wonderful people. It was 7 of the best years ever, right? So I just have good vibes about Barry, and I know they're doing a good job down there. So I think a lot of that has that feeling, right? It's that gut feeling. If all you remember are exam on Monday after exam on Monday at board exams, rotations where you're traveling, I mean, some of that was hard work too, right?
Or they go out of their way to make you miserable. Like, there's just multiple. I was class president, so I was involved in a lot of behind the scenes that not everyone knew about. And it was like, why are you doing this? Why do you make something that doesn't have to be? The threshold is to learn. If we meet the threshold, why do you care what the next? And a lot of this is inferiority complexes. I mean, that's rampant through medicine. It's rampant through education. And, years later, some of the teachers who, I became friendly with over time after the fact started to realize that, yeah, maybe I was a hard ass. They said, but you became a great doctor because of it. I said, because of it or in spite of it? I don't know the difference.
Yeah, a little of both, probably.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both.
So, yeah, and then I go back to residency, and I didn't come from a family in medicine. I don't know if you did, Bret. Did you have your family in medicine?
Nah, teacher and accountant.
Really? Oh, same here. It was teacher and accountant, but in advertising. So same kind of background. And so medicine was new to me. So I was like wide-eyed, right? I'm like, oh my God, this is so awesome. So that was kind of
exciting. I enjoyed it. I mean, there's no question I enjoyed it. I chose podiatry as I chose to other things in medicine. And, I just had this perception of being a younger parent than some of my friends who were doctors who were, growing up. They were an orthopedic surgeon or they were something. They never had the dad who played ball with us.
Right. Oh, of course.
So I wanted, right. So I had that as a goal. It didn't work out that way while being older, but, it was at least a mission at that point. And podiatry, I was sold the bill of goods to everyone else is 4 years, you're a surgeon, right? Not really,
Well, hold on.
Now,
let's unpack that a little bit, Bret. When did you decide to go into podiatric medical school?
End of third year of college, beginning of fourth year, I guess. I decided I was going to be a doctor. And I was at USF in Tampa,
right,
Florida, and biology, chemistry, and finance major. So I had you went to the business school because the prettier ladies were over there as opposed to the science side of campus. I believe success leaves clues. Go where people are and get what you want. It's a good mantra in everything in life. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I just have to find somebody getting the result I want and then emulate them, which is why these dean chats and any of these mentor events, every student should watch. I mean, I used to tell students all the time, you're going to interview at program so-and-so. Why wouldn't you listen to how Dr. So-and-so describes success? What are his meanings? What are those things? And those were the Meet the Masters. The students were huge. I mean, the students were 250,000, 300,000 listens.
Yep.
Just from them.
It's the same way today. In fact, we've got playlists on YouTube that are highlighted, every school or college of podiatric medicine, with all the videos that are related to that college. And I think if you're a student today, a prospective student, it's just a tremendous asset to be able to go in and learn, and not just on a website or going to an interview, but kind of get that objective kind of more of a feel of the profession in general. But I'm interested. You went to Temple. Why Temple?
Barry didn't exist.
Fair enough.
I was in Miami. Barry wasn't there. New York kind of didn't like the neighborhood, and where I'd have to live would be so impoverished because of the cost of living in New York City. Chicago was way too cold. Oh, same with Ohio. And California, I guess, was a little too far away, and the people were a little different. I remember Iowa, I got offered a free ride from Len Levy. And retrospectively, I should have gone there just for the free ride, just to eliminate the indebtedness that I gathered for school. But I just couldn't imagine. When I went there, the evening news told how many pigs were killed that night. And I was like, this is strange. I'm an East Coast, I grew up born in Miami Beach, which was, part of New York before Cuba took it over in the late 70s, early 80s, and it became the capital of South America. So you learned a different model.
Yeah, all time.
So Philly was this nice school. It was a pretty building. It was in a city at that point that wasn't, what it is today.
Fair enough. And you were there 4 years.
4 years at school, and then my first year of residency was at the James Giuffre Medical Center, which was the first residency program in podiatry. Art Health ran it.
Right.
And it was an absolute, I don't know if ghetto or urban is the correct term for hospital today, but it was the bottom of people were there, and it had the prison contract. So you had this unique opportunity to do an incredible amount because most of the attendings didn't want to show up.
Right.
They got paid welfare wages or Medicaid or whatever it's called these days. But so they let the residents do a lot. I mean, I ran bowels. I did a lot of things. 2 months into the program, the state closed the hospital because some of the general surgeons were doing too many. Somebody came in with stomach pain. They did a subtotal gastrectomy instead of giving them Tagamet. So these surgeons were all kind of in trouble. And so when they closed it, but they couldn't get rid of the place because it had the prison contract.
Sure.
So it wound up being the city emergency room and all that, but all the podiatry elective care went elsewhere. Oh. So after a couple months, Mariachi was one of my attendings to go back into something, and they stopped bringing cases there. So, you call them up, can I come watch you at a different hospital, even though I wasn't the resident? And Harold Vogler would let me go to the other hospital, St. Joe's down the street at the other end, and let me go and watch things, but I wasn't getting to do a lot. Right. So I got to the end of this residency program, which was considered a POR at the time. We were back in alphabet residencies, so that made me eligible for board in orthopedics, even though we didn't do anything much different than anybody else did, because we had no attendings and we had no podiatry patients, except those who were handcuffed to a table. And they come for follow-up. You can't miss those handcuffed patients.
So it was no surprise then that you seeked out additional residency training.
I went back through Doxey. I went through Casper again. So you had to go through this, and I was going through all these places. Where do I want to interview? And on numbers, Doxey Hatch, which is Salt Lake City, was an incredible program.
Sure.
But everybody they took was Mormon. In the history of that program, everybody was a Mormon. So, and great guys, not many gals. I think there was one before me, but that changed. And then I applied, and I said, well, at least I'll get to go skiing. I'll go on a ski vacation there. And surprise to me is I was their top choice. Greg Young would tell me.
Right.
And I came in with, knowledge, expectations, but yet I wasn't somebody who they thought would ever set up practice in Salt Lake City. They were right. So I wasn't going to become the competition, which all the other residents for the last 10 years have become. And there's a place where we did, 2,000 bunionectomies, 600, 700 gastrocnemius resections. There were 40 doctors. Most were trained all over, from Kern, from all the major programs in the country. And this was the only hospital in Salt Lake City they were allowed to work at. And then with Greg Young, hooked it up to work with the Veterans Hospital. So we got this incredible thing, man. My second year there, I think became the administrator for Greg of running, involved in how the residency programs are done and all the paperwork. I filled out all the council documents, and I'm indebted forever to this because at one point, I learned to be a doctor, and I remember the day. I mean, nobody remembers these things, but Salt Lake City was a regional VA, and they used to fly you in a Lear jet to Miles City, Montana, Helena, Montana, Grand Junction, Colorado, every Friday. Once a week, you went to a different place. And it's like kind of cool. You go in a Lear jet until they pick you up in a disabled American veteran van with rust holes and cold air coming in Montana. But I remember calling Greg Young up about some diabetic patient, infection, and all this. And I said, well, I'm presenting the case like I've done since I started, clinical medicine. And he says, just take care of it. And he hung up on me. And I became a doctor that day. I made my own decisions. And the trajectory has been exponential ever since.
Outstanding. So when you finished your residency, back to Boca, right? Boca Raton.
Yeah. Well, I came to join a large group in Miami, the Institute of Medical Specialists. It was the beginning of the amalgamation of medicine, where a guy who owned a hospital sold it to National Medical, which became Tenet down the road. He was sitting with like $60 million, and he either spends it or he pays tax on it. It's almost like you would do in real estate, a 1030 exchange to go shift it over. So he bought specialists and put them all together. He bought the best urology group, the best orthopedic group, the best that. And, he bought the outside of the wheel instead of the hub, which then medicine changed to find out that he made the wrong decision. So the group I went to was one of the orthopedic groups, and it was the owner's perception that they would bring these guys in under 5-year contracts and bring in younger people. And then eventually when these contracts, they'd have the younger people to take over. Well, I joined the orthopedic group. The group was the team doctor for the Miami Dolphins, a guy named Melvin Drucker was there early on. And as soon as they got their money, they just stopped the ER call. They stopped everything they wanted to make them who they were. So I was excited to be the Dolphins doctor, right, and Miami Dolphins. And then they gave up the contract. They stopped doing everything. So the loopholes are, so ultimately this group started to fall apart. Right. And as it did that, I'm looking for a lifeboat. And, at the very beginning, I wound up working with it was a guy from Kern, David Schwarzenfeld, in North Miami Beach, and worked with him for a couple months, but I wasn't happy with his kind of practice. I still was into this high power. I was one of the first 3-year residency trained. I mean, I did 2 separate. I did a POR and a PSR 24. Other people did a PSR 24 plus. They called it 3 years, but they didn't have 3 years of, quote, residency training. Right. So eventually I convinced the Cleveland Clinic that they needed somebody. And how that opportunity wound up is some heart patient came to me that they operated on and was told that she needs to walk, but her feet hurt. So I got her walking. So the head of CT surgery contacted me and said, why don't you work for us? And that's how I wound up at the Cleveland Clinic. Then the business of medicine starts to get involved, and they want you to work harder, stronger for no more money, harder, stronger. And then they start, making things a little more difficult for you because, there's a hierarchy in academic medicine, and I was clearly at the foot of it. So eventually we had a parting of the ways about 3 years later. And that's when I moved to Boca Raton. And I was there for 22 years, I think, until I got hurt. Right. In 2015.
So we'll talk more about that. Let's talk for a second, Bret, about your induction into the Hall of Fame. What was that like for you? And what were all the things that you did that kind of gave the stepping stones to receiving that honor?
Well, the Podiatry Hall of Fame was I kind of use it as like a drop the mic moment. A John Elway, win the Super Bowl and retire. Right. I was probably the youngest president in the American College of Foot Medicine. I was on the exam boards or the exam committees of both boards at one point. I wound up going through all the chairs of AgFoam. I wound up being head of the liaison committee of podiatric medical education, the LCP MEP. probably 30 times a year I was on a plane.
Right.
Million miles, you get button seats. And, so I was doing a lot of lecturing for pharmaceutical companies, a lot of lecturing, and then a lot of charity work. I did a lot of stuff with the Baja Project, helped Mark Bernard out.
Sure.
And, helped him with marketing and stuff that I thought he needed. So I guess I was known, and I think that helps. And then getting hurt I was volunteering with the Coast Guard on May 20th, 2015 during National Safe Boating Week. And this is something I've done for about 10 years.
Yeah.
Again, the wife was a dermatologist and she didn't like the sun. So that means she doesn't like boating. I like boating, go out with Coast Guard people, but the guy crashed.
Can you build that up though? Your Coast Guard background, because that was not just a one-off. I mean, you'd been building up.
No, I about 12 years of doing that. I had all the certifications you could have. I was an incident commander. I wound up being a lieutenant commander, 2.5 stripes. So I wound up reasonably, I've always been this organized leader person. So you tend to get into an organization and, you point out how you can make it better. And next thing you know, you get promoted to your level of incompetence and you keep going up till you get there. So I enjoyed it. It was something to do. We were, it was a bunch of diversified people. I mean, everyone I knew was medicine. I mean, that's who our friends are. The people, the nurses, the doctors, the people you hang out with, you tend to be that. Then you have children, so you have those friends. And then I didn't have anybody else. So this was like finding a bunch of boating friends.
Right. And,
you live here in South Florida, you take advantage of it. They train you to be outstanding, went through multiple courses and tests and examinations to get to a higher level qualification as a coxswain and all the things that you could get to. I wound up teaching navigation. I teach health. I teach a bunch of classes for them. And not just the auxiliary side, but also the gold side, the enlisted and the officers, because they learn a lot from our experience. But when you guys see the helicopters picking up the people in, Louisiana or somewhere, or anything goes wrong, they got to practice somewhere.
Sure. I
was the guy they practiced with. So we used to do all those things, 5 miles offshore at night, dark, 15 feet under a Huey helicopter or a Dolphin helicopter most of the time. And that's like being in a hurricane. 85-mile-an-hour winds. It spins the boat. It was an adrenaline rush for the boring foot doctor who was getting tired of heel pain.
Right.
Stories, over and over again. So I did that for a long time. Well, this one night we did it, came in, had dinner. On our way back home, the guy driving hit the rocks in an inlet. Must have had a scotoma, blind spot. He was aiming for the bridge. Has he been through it 100 times before? Absolutely. Don't know why. I was sitting in the back of the boat, thrown forward, knocked unconscious. I don't remember anything. The next thing I do is I wake up and there's a white light. And I'm like, shit, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I start getting a little more or less groggy. And I can see his life jacket says CETO. And I'm like, God's a CETO operator. This is like wild. Get a little more conscious and realize I'm sitting in a boat sinking. And I can't move my body. So I try to get up. It won't move. So the next thing I do is I start feeling around. Am I been penetrated by something? Am I impacted? Am I bleeding somewhere? Don't see that. Can't get up. The other people on the boat, one guy screamed. He goes, I thought you were dead. We were trying to wake you up for 4 minutes. And you didn't wake up. And wound up, I was unconscious for 8. Wound up breaking most of the bones in both feet, both ankles, my knee, my hip, L1, L2, L3. Broke 5 ribs, herniated a bunch of discs in my neck, and wound up spending in and out of surgery a year in a hospital, give or take, get to walk again. And during all this, actually, there's all these stories about me on these lines, but I was not taken to the hospital I was on privileges at. I was taken to the next one because it was closer, and I was considered a pre-trauma patient. Sure. It was a trauma 1 center, and there were no podiatrists who had reasonably good privileges at this one. Yeah. But I did get in my first operation, a podiatrist who was there. One of my ex-residents used to work there. So she knew somebody who was there, and a podiatrist who was brand new right out of school. And I got her to scrub in. So, at least she got to meet the orthopedist who did my calcaneal fractures. And didn't do them that well. I had a non-union, wound up getting it redone. Steve Spinner redid my one of my feet. Still a non-union, but it doesn't hurt. Steve says it's a non-union, it's just not bony.
Question for you. So when you hit these rocks, did the boat just come to an immediate halt, or did it flip, or what happened exactly?
Well, it probably went up. I went back and looked at all the forensics and everything that was done. Big hole in the front of the boat. It hit the rock at the jetty. And it was kind of weird. About a year later, there was a baseball player out of the Marlins who went out drunk, hit different ones. He hit the ones by the Miami Inlet,
I remember.
Killed 3 people. And they renamed the street and made a statue for him. Nobody died I wasn't driving, but nobody died on this Coast Guard boat. I didn't get a street or anything.
No. So,
I have a parking spot with my name on it, if that counts. So that's like.
There you go. Well, you had mentioned to me a couple weeks ago that you went full circle at that point. You went from to patient. All of a sudden, you're the patient.
Yeah. Right. Now I'm the patient. So I went from, the student to the doctor to the educator to the politician to now the patient. So I got a unique 360 view, because now all of a sudden I have foot problems.
Yep.
I'm going through stuff, and it's shocking how organized medicine tries to put you into the peg that they're used to treating. Like, I spent a lot of time in a wheelchair, and then by the time I started walking, I know of the Alter G. I don't know if many people are using that now, but it's basically a weight reduction device. You get it in a big air tube that they zip around your waist, and you can weigh 10 pounds or 20 pounds. Right. So if I could walk with 20 pounds of weight on me, and then a week later, 25 pounds of weight. But in doing so, my feet were swollen and not in the right orientation, because they were Liz Frank fractures that weren't dealt with. So I went through 6 pair of orthotics in probably 6 months, and nobody wanted to get them for me. It was like the biggest hassle. No, you're not indicated. It's not appropriate. You would help so many people who are trauma patients get faster recovery if you brought the ground up to meet their foot instead of making their foot fall down to meet the ground. And I think that was an opportunity that I shared with a lot of people since that time. And there was cascading errors that went on. I given a couple of I like to say that one of my final lectures I gave was the Pica lecture, which is the ultimate one for a podiatric educator. If you get to give the Pica lecture, you made it.
There you go.
Because that's the one where the room is absolutely packed. There's not a chair in the place. I like to think it was because of me, not that they were getting $1,200 to attend my lecture, but a reduction on their premium for those who don't understand it.
Like everything, it was probably a little of both.
It's just, I just like the idea of pointing out. So I've always tried to take the experience. If I learn something, I don't want somebody else to have to go through it. And that's, I think, the essence of an educator.
Absolutely.
Can you make everything a little bit better along the way? And then about a year after I got done with all this and I could walk, the spouse came down with pancreatic cancer. So I spent...
How long did it take you to recover? This is 2015 to when?
Right. I got injured in 15. I could walk again towards the end of 16. And then...
got it. Okay.
Towards the end of 16, I could walk again. I mean, I wore out those wheel devices after when Steve Spinner operated on one leg. So, it took a while. Sure. And I was like the model patient. I went through every bone stimulator company ever. I had all of them. I would use them both. I would use the ultrasonic and the pulse electronic magnetic field.
Sure.
I said, well, maybe some cells listen to one, some listen to another. Why not stack the deck if I can?
Absolutely.
I still have the non-union to this day.
Brett, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Hurt.
I did not mean to cut you off, but you said your spouse then got sick.
Yeah, and she came down with pancreatic cancer, and she was a dermatologist. So it was like, okay, now I have one patient and one disease. So I became one of the foremost authorities in the world, I think, on pancreatic cancer. I read everything. I called every presenter at every seminar. I spoke to Japan, and we kept doing things. Within about 10 days of her getting diagnosed, we were at Johns Hopkins, her getting a Whipple, because that was considered the home run surgery. And Cameron was the guy who invented perfected the Whipple, where people stopped dying on the table, and did very well. And she did well for a while, and then recovered, kept getting it. We wound up living in Baltimore for probably almost a year, 9 months maybe. And then we went for a trial in La Jolla. And this is during COVID, so it was a miserable time to travel. You had to go travel, buy into NetJet because you couldn't travel commercial anymore because you couldn't nobody wanted to take the risk with a suppressed immune system.
Right.
And, she made it a week short of 4 years when one of the doctors at Harvard, what was that? Was it Innovator? No, I'll think of the name of the medical center there, Dana Farber at Harvard, who said that she probably wouldn't make a year. The guy told me, and she made a week over 4 years. I think she spent a little bit more time at the end. Jimmy Buffett has a song, and I'm a big parrot head, but it talks about that I'd rather die while I'm living than live while I'm dying. And she spent probably the last 2 years worrying about dying. She would read all the papers, but wouldn't read the conclusions because she didn't want to know how it ended. And it's pancreatic cancer, so there is no good ending to it.
And one of my best friends I climbed Mount McKinley with actually had pancreatic cancer, and he had the Whipple and lots of different treatments, and it's a tough disease. So you went through a lot.
It's a rough thing. So now, that was when she got sick, was the end of Meet the Masters.
Oh, okay.
Because I just couldn't do that and still do all the things I was doing and manage her. It just became too much for me to do. And I looked for other people to try to help out and take over, but as in anything, it doesn't always, best laid plans are written at low tide in sand.
Yep.
So
there you go. That's a good saying. I'm sorry, but that's a tough time for you.
Right. It was a miserable 5 years, 6 years. So you get through it and you got to be optimistic. I mean, either the glass is half empty or the glass is half full, or you're thirsty and thank God you have a glass.
There you go.
Your life gives you lemons. You don't make lemonade, you make limoncello.
There you go. I like that. So last time you and I were texting, getting ready for this show, you were out playing pickleball.
Well, I try to. I'm not good. I can't move sideways. I can move forward. And if it comes to me, I can hit it. So I do that. Unfortunately, I still walk with a cane. When I had my ACDF, my anterior cervical discectomy and fusion in my neck, one of the cages is a little bit too large. And no way to know that. But as a result, my rhomboid muscle on my left side is in constant spasm. Okay. So I use a cane to deaccelerate the transverse plane motion of my shoulders, because otherwise it goes into excruciating pain. So the disability companies and all them are like, what do you need the cane for? No doctor wrote it for you. Well, I said, this is why. So they wouldn't believe me. So I wrote a paper.
There you go.
Then in some obscure orthopedic trade journal or something that was willing to accept it from a podiatrist. Right. But I talked about transverse plane motion and deacceleration during gait using a cane. Right. And so when the insurance company gives me heck, I send them a copy of the published paper, and it takes them about 3 or 4 months to realize I'm the author.
That's funny.
But they don't figure it out right away.
No, there you go.
We can talk about disability. I've been had to fill out mine. I had to fill out hers. Now a lot of other friends. Mm-hmm. And there's some real things that are, as a profession, we don't answer very well. What is a surgical procedure? If you want disability from being a podiatric surgeon, you got to be able to show that you can't operate. But they want to see that the preponderance of your work is surgery. Well, thankfully, every time you pick up an instrument under Medicare's rules, that's surgery. Every time you give a shot, that's considered surgery. So you have to go learn how to go through a lot of these demographics. They all ask for your last year's CPT codes you build. Sure. There's a lot of information insurance companies want before they process you. So we're still in this, nobody really understands who we are.
Right.
They know we do something, but they're not really sure what makes one podiatrist different than another podiatrist. And unfortunately in our profession, the way you choose to practice has huge dichotomies of, not only economic results, but they play down to every other aspect and trickle down. Sure. I wrote a paper a long time ago called Surgery's Fun, but Fungus Pays the Bills. And I think I did that in 2005. And I probably have given that lecture 40, 50 times. I think every student should hear it because it goes through doing a huge rear foot reconstructive case with the frame and looking at the clock. And I was putting in how much time I spent and how many hours and what I got paid, and then divide it out to how much I get paid per minute, and then compare the same thing to treating tinea pedis. And you'll find out that fungus pays the bills.
Yep. Yeah, and we tell our students all the time, you want to be able to provide care, surgical and non-surgical, to babies to end of life. I mean, whatever is needed at the right time for the right person.
But it's such a broad lens to be able to do everything. We live in a world that everybody wants a super specialist. Like, would you go to David Armstrong for a pair of orthotics?
No,
Probably not.
Yep.
If I had a venous stasis leg wound, you're one of the world's best in that. You were one of the founders of the treatment for this and spent significant time, effort, and money to bring it to this profession, which hopefully they caught it. I know the nurses really caught what you were doing, and the physical therapists, you're a god when you walk into those seminars.
For sure. Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think ultimately we do have decisions to make. Where are you going to specialize? Where are you going to put your time and energy? And what kind of practice are you going to have? But really, from the educational perspective, Bret, we're trying to give these kids a foundation so that they can go into residency and make.
When you come out of school, you should be basic qualified. You shouldn't really be absolutely outstanding in anything, but you shouldn't be anything you're massively deficient in. I mean, I graduated PCPM having not done an ingrown toenail. And it was like, so right before graduation, I asked people where they all said, go to that Army base in Fort Bragg or whatever it was. So I made arrangements with a guy named David Auxillary, who was the dean at the school. I said, listen, can I have, out of this rotation, can I go down there for a week? Because I haven't done an ingrown toenail.
Wow.
And I went down there and I did almost 60 of them in 4 days.
There you go.
I learned how to do it. But students need to figure out what you're deficient in. Absolutely. and run to the light. Don't run away from it.
Fortunately, times have changed, with we're talking a while back. I remember being in school too. We had some deficiencies that you had to correct in residency. But that academic didactic knowledge is there, and then residency is there to kind of put it into play with patients and dealing with patients and attendings. And 3 years is a long time. I mean, I did 2 years of residency. You did 3. I think today mandating 3 years of residency is a good thing for most of these students.
Well, we're turning out doctors.
Yep.
Not. I would say when we went to school, maybe 20% of our class were doctors, 20% were technicians,
right?
And other people vacillated between the two,
right?
Because some people found a niche in something. I mean, you can make an absolute fortune being a pediatric person, where nobody really looks at that, but every old person has grandkids. And
it's funny, Bret, you said, are you a doctor or are you a technician? I can hear Dr. Bill Todd asking me that at Kern back in the day. Are you a doctor or are you a technician? Let's make it happen.
Yes. I got that from Vogler.
Did you? All right. Very good. Very good. So any last thoughts about our profession, where we've been and where we're going, Bret? The stage is yours.
Well, this is tough to do on the Dean's Chat because I have some real philosophical 40,000-foot philosophy that need to come down to the runway. I think we're turning out a lot of students. We have lowered we're not filling the schools as we should. We're delving a little deeper in the academic pool to get them, because the more, let's say, academic people are able to go into what is perceived to be a better medical outcome. You could be an MD, DO, and now a PA has offered such opportunity that the DPM is still being held behind. And there's no question that the training of a DPM at the end blows away any PA. But in the respect in the healthcare world and the reimbursement in the healthcare world, they haven't caught up yet. So I think we're sitting in a lot of this. I would love to see podiatry change. I wrote this 2001, I think, was that the school should be turning out, I can't come up with a better word, but let's say podiatric hygienists. It'd be people out of high school. They would run through 9 months or whatever school, and these people would work in podiatry offices and only be licensed to work in podiatry offices to do palliative care the same way a dental hygienist cleans teeth for a dentist. So you would have 2 or 3 of these people working in your office, running 75 people a day, seeing them. You would also have your own schedule, but through these other people, you'd pop your head in and get that melanoma, the mole, the neuroma, the heel pain, the ingrown toenail. And the reimbursement for doctors who have practiced that way have jumped up to the $500,000 range.
Sure.
They have jumped up 2 standard deviations among everyone else. The problem is that doing tasks that are beneath you. And we'd all agree that palliative care, you don't need, 4 years of college, 4 years of podiatry school, 3 years of residency to deal with palliative care. You're well overtrained for that. But you should be overseeing it. And I would love to see that model move a lot better. I think that would help save the schools and help save the profession. The average podiatry office would then be 3 treatment rooms, would now have 5 treatment rooms. But you'd rotate more people through the door, which would build your reputation. Look at, I ran a dermatology practice that was 4 doctors, a plastic surgeon, and 3 PAs, and 1 nurse practitioner. And, we're making $1 million a month. You can get, and you're rolling them in and out. And logistically, it's a system, and you want people to do well. And there are some podiatrists in this profession who are excellent people. Like one of my favorite lecturers on my Meet the Master show, and this is a long time ago, and I haven't talked to him in years, but was a guy in Orange County, California, Richard Moy. Richard Moy was the bunion guy. He did 50 bunions a month. That's all he did. He didn't treat anything else. He would see 10 new patients an hour. He would bring them in, have a lecture for 20 minutes, and then see each one individually for a couple of minutes while the other 9 patients were talking to post-op patients. Right. So it was an excellent, he McDonaldized. If everyone's seen the movie Founders and how well the McDonald brothers figured out how to make a hamburger and which way to spin, the efficiency, but he just does bunions. Some other people in Southern California, Alan Sellner, did 5,000 bunions. And they did this they got great results. They published all their outcomes. So we can't say they're not great doctors, but they figured out how to do it better.
Right.
And I just think that we're training people now to go work for somebody else. And if we're training you to work for somebody else, and I own this large, let's say, medical group, I pay the podiatrist $250,000, $200,000. 3-4 years later, when that person wants $400,000, I go and get a new one for $150,000. And now, what do you do when you're used to kids in school? You have a lifestyle that's more expensive, and now you don't have a job anymore. Right. And I see that the future coming.
I see that for a lot of people in the future coming. I agree. These are topics you and I could go on forever, and I don't mind doing another Dean's Chat with you, Bret, because a couple things that you said that just rang with me. So you remember when I was in Miami as the dean of the School of Podiatric Medicine, I was also overseeing the PA program. There's differences. There's different educational entrance points. There's different design of what you want to.
But that's from your knowledge, from the outside world, from somebody who doesn't know the details. It's still a PR game. When they became from physician assistants to physician associates, the idea that as a profession, they changed their name and nobody bitched.
Right.
Everyone should know that they're not physician assistants, they're physician associates. And now they have independent practice licenses in many places. Right. And some of them have doctorates. So now they're Dr. So-and-so.
Nope,
kind of scary.
You're absolutely right. Lots to discuss there. I'm totally with you on that. I think that our profession's challenged right now. You're right. Students have a lot of opportunity, whether it's in business or engineering or the health professions. And DO schools are opening dime a dozen, right? PAs and NPs are taking a segment of those health professionals because they see the very quick turnaround and return on investment. So there's a lot of challenges out there. But
right. So why doesn't our profession, why does APMA start to assess every member $1,000, do an incredible marketing blitzkrieg to do that? This is what we do. Pick some niches of what we do, become indispensable in the healthcare market.
Brand the profession appropriately.
Limb salvage is an indispensable thing. Yep. Now, I really think that the industry, the healthcare industry, it's much cheaper to cut off the leg. Armstrong uses those quotes all the time in his lectures. He marvels at a society that would pay more to cut off a leg than to save it. Right. And Oscar Wilde said that. And those kind of people who have pushed this. So I think that we need, if we sit back and do nothing, we're going to lose.
Yep, you're absolutely.
We have to make some modifications and some changes, and we need to have a conversation. And your dean's council need to sit down together and realize that yes, if we have to amalgamate into MD medicine 20 years from tomorrow, well, we start the path today, and we make sure that everybody has a ramp to their success during this transition period. It's not easy, but we have to start somewhere. Remember, the general surgeon used to cut your hair.
Right.
Back originally. The red barbershop pole was the bloody sheets from the general surgeon. So everybody has progressed. We made some we've done a lot of changes. We've gotten hospital privileges in my lifetime as a podiatrist. We have got into insurance panels. We've become recognized. We're now part of the healthcare delivery team, but we're not considered on the same shelf.
Right.
And that's
those changes need to be made. You're preaching to the choir here, Bret. Bret, we're running a little low on time. On behalf of the profession, thank you for all you've done. Oh my gosh. I mean, these discussions, we could go on forever, and we should just do another one too.
Well, but I think it should be done. How about a big open house with a bunch of the leaders, or take a bunch of the has-beens? I mean, I guess I'm a has-been, been disabled now I still have a tremor in my hand, so I can't do much, but in 8 years now, I do it. But there's a lot of people out there who don't have a dog in the fight.
Right.
In the outcome.
Right.
We have organizations that are self-picking their own people. We have boards that are wasting time to solve problems. I volunteered to be the executive director of the medical board for $1 a year. No money, I'll do it. And the goal is to solve this infighting. All we need is each organization. I mean, I put in PM News. Look at the money of these organizations. Look at their 990 reports. Surgery's got more money than everybody else combined. Plus, if they assess people, they would all pay it.
Hey,
Medicine doesn't have as many people. So we got to come up and stop this inbreeding. Realize that I think we all live in a beautiful condominium. Some people live on the top floor. They worked harder to get there. Some people live on the second floor, but we all use the same pool. We all use the same gym. We live as a group together, and we don't keep fighting each other. And that's what I keep seeing going on. I read all the things. I participate, like most of the has-beens who write on PM News, giving our advice that's 20 years out of date. Where are the new students? Why aren't they participating? Why aren't they getting it? Why aren't the schools inviting a bunch of the has-beens to come have a 2-day weekend or something with them to answer questions and talk about people who don't have a song or a dance anymore? And you don't see that. And that's where I see the AA and some of these groups trying to get together and say, hey, let's not just look for tomorrow. Let's look, what's our 10-year goal?
Absolutely. No, that is actually going on as we speak. But there are factions within the profession that it's like running uphill.
I have mine and you're not going to get, I have mine and I'm not going to share. Well, we've all watched enough movies so you can make them an offer they can't refuse.
There you go.
And things move forward. I'm sure it wasn't easy to become a DSC to a DPM. I'm sure there was, if you talk to some of Irv Kennett was one of the ones who used to tell me a bunch of stories at a bar at different hotels as we lectured around together, that it was blow your mind of how they had to get things done.
Oh, yeah. I heard those too. Irv was my residency director.
Right.
Yeah, he's
right. And so I knew you knew him well.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to see how things had to happen.
Yep.
And now things need to happen. We can't just coast.
Nope.
And I kind of believe we've been coasting on our laurels for a decade.
I'd
like to see the changes.
If you're watching on YouTube, please become a subscriber. And if you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google Podcasts, please give us a 5-star rating. Until next week, thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Don't miss out.